Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another meditation and Dhamma talk here at Empty Cloud Monastery. So, hello so far to Gita Jnana, Elaine, How's our friend, and Ron. Welcome. Good to see you joining in. So, as usual, we'll start with a period of meditation. Hello also to Robin and Melinda. We'll start with a period of meditation, and then after the meditation, I'll give a talk, and after the talk, I'll answer any questions that you might have. So feel free to type in questions at any time, and I'll go through them at the end. And hello as well to Lloyd. So go ahead and get in a stable, upright sitting position. So taking a moment to rock your hips side to side a little bit, making sure that your weight is distributed evenly on the cushion and there's not pressure on any nerves that might put your legs to sleep. And take a few long, slow, deep breaths, letting the body and mind relax with each breath. And bring your mind to the body, choosing some region of the body to hold the mind still in. This could be as large as the whole body or as small as a single pinpoint. As long as the mind remains unmoving, completely still within that region. So I won't give guidance during this meditation. The practice we'll be doing is very simple. Keep the mind still and alert. So body and mind unmoving, with attention sharp, clear, and bright. Okay, you can relax. And welcome to some more friends joining in. So welcome Chittapala, Michael and Putrika. Good to see you. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So here at Empty Cloud Monastery, we just started a 2-month retreat. We just started a few days ago. 3 days, 4 days. I'm already losing track. This is actually a good sign. As one gets more into retreat mode, then days become meaningless. Dates become meaningless. Time becomes meaningless. It's just the endless moment of meditation. And we're not involved in much of anything else. Except for the awareness of the daily schedule and trying to follow the daily schedule. And in cultivating Samadhi practice, of course, the retreat is designed to provide optimal conditions. So starting with the basic supporting conditions for Samadhi practice. So the next 3 talks, so today, tomorrow evening, and the evening after that, I'll be giving talks on the theme of Samadhi. So I'd like to start by talking about the basic external conditions, supporting conditions for Samadhi practice. So in developing Samadhi, we're trying to cultivate a mind which is still and alert. That's basically it. That's what Samadhi is. It's when the mind is completely still and completely alert. That's really it. Nonetheless, I'm going to talk quite a bit more about the subject because there's a lot which goes into making the mind simultaneously sharp and still. But the first thing is to stop moving the mind and to stop doing anything which agitates or jostles the mind. So again, during a retreat, we practice noble silence, so refraining from any unnecessary conversation. And this is because conversation tends to agitate and stir up the mind, tends to jostle the mind. Now, it's possible to engage in a certain amount of conversation without allowing it to gain a foothold in one's mind, but that's more advanced practice. It's easier just to avoid conversation entirely. And similarly, to avoid any kind of verbal activity that isn't directly related to dhamma. It's generally advised that if you're trying to develop samadhi, it's advised to minimize or avoid reading fiction, novels of any sort. And also to avoid reading anything in the secular or worldly domain. So reading things about politics or world history or other religions or Western psychology or anything along those lines is all to be avoided. If one is going to read anything, then one should read dhamma. So reading the suttas is actually quite supportive to samadhi practice. I've actually had many retreats where rather than switching between sitting and walking and sitting and walking, I would switch sitting and suttas, sitting and suttas, sitting and suttas. and only do a little bit of walking meditation once in a while. And I found that under those circumstances, my samadhi would be very strong. Though, advance warning, it is not so great for your body. So this does tend to produce a lot of achiness if you're just sitting all the time. But the point here being is that sutta study does not agitate the mind in the same way that reading about psychology and politics and history and fiction and all those things tends to agitate the mind. And also avoiding, once again, anything which agitates and stirs the mind. So one of the basic practices that we do at the monastery, just as a general rule, is we don't have music here. We don't listen to music. We don't engage with music at all. Of course, sometimes it's unavoidable. Maybe a neighbor is playing their music really loudly, or someone's car drives by with the stereo all the way up. But otherwise, we avoid contact with music. And also, of course, avoiding watching shows and playing games and all those sorts of things, which, again, generate a lot of unnecessary activity in the mind. So we're trying to avoid any kind of mental activity which is not directly related to dhamma. And even then, we make a sharp distinction between the time for dhamma contemplation and the time for samadhi practice. So right now, listening to a dhamma talk is a time for dhamma contemplation. It's not actually the time for samadhi. But then as soon as the talk ends, and one resumes doing sitting and walking meditation, then it's time for samadhi again. So these are our two basic modes if one wants one's samadhi practice to develop. There's samadhi mode and dhamma contemplation mode. And even then, one should be spending the majority of one's time in samadhi mode. So 80% or more, to put a number on it. So again, it's fine. In the course of a day, you might spend a couple hours reading some suttas or something. But otherwise, trying to spend as much of your time as possible cultivating a still mind, an alert mind. Another thing which helps tremendously with stillness of mind, and this one is quite interesting that we find mentioned a few places in the suttas, is humility. So when one is going about with a sense of self-superiority and arrogance and conceit, then samadhi practice is remarkably difficult. Maintaining a constant sense of inflated self-importance, a constant sense of inflated ego, is an activity which keeps the mind in constant movement. And it's also continually reifying our sense of self, which also is an impediment to samadhi, and it's definitely an impediment to insight and awakening. So cultivating a humble mind, a mind which is not relating to the world in terms of better or worse or equal even. So cultivating a mind which is not relating to the world in terms of a self-identity, but rather is just seeing each moment as it is, as a confluence of causes and conditions. And in that confluence of causes and conditions, we're not getting wrapped up in anything that comes and goes. So whatever is going on, we don't participate. Of course, we do need to do our daily duties. So whatever it is that we need to do in order to get through each day, at a bare minimum, we generally need to use the toilet a few times a day. Unless you're fasting, you generally need to eat once or twice or maybe 3 times a day. Almost always you need to drink a fair amount of water every day. You might bathe once a day or once every couple days, or possibly less often than that, especially if you're by yourself. It's actually not so critical. And you might have some chores to do, cooking and cleaning and so on, basic work duties. But whatever activity one is engaged in, keep the mind focused just on that activity and maintaining clear, alert mindfulness of the body throughout that activity. So not wandering off into thought, not getting distracted or spacey or pointing the mind in various directions, but just keeping your attention on whatever activity you're doing, keeping your mind on the task, and keeping your attention firmly grounded in the body. And if you maintain that throughout the activity, then when you resume your samadhi practice afterwards, you'll find that you haven't lost the momentum of your practice. In fact, you might find that the momentum continued building, even as you were engaging in whatever activities you were in. So, of course, I'm speaking in retreat terms, but all of these same principles apply even outside of retreat. Generally speaking, if you want your meditation practice to go well and you want your samadhi to be strong, then you want to live every day as much like a retreat as possible. And you want to live your life as much like a monk as possible. So avoiding doing anything which is going to stir up or agitate the mind, and avoiding doing anything which is going to generate any kind of unwholesome mind state. So any mind state of desire, aversion, lust, hatred, irritation, confusion, distraction, spaciness, dullness, anything like that. We want to make a conscious effort to avoid doing anything which strengthens those sorts of mind states, those unwholesome characteristics of mind. Which, once again, means pretty much acting like you're living in a monastery. So even if you're a lay person and you're living in a house and you have a ordinary layperson life, whatever that means, I have no idea what an ordinary layperson life is. I wasn't ordinary even when I was a layperson, and I know a lot of lay people who are similarly unordinary. But even if you're living a layperson's life, if you want your samadhi to be strong, live as much like a monk as you can. And then you'll notice that your samadhi practice is directly supported by that. So these are the surrounding conditions for samadhi practice. And actually, to be perfectly honest, the vast majority of people, rather than get all caught up in methods of meditation, the vast majority of practitioners, they need to focus rather on the supporting conditions, the external conditions which engender samadhi. So everything I've just been speaking about. So an example is there's one person I know, I haven't spoken to him in quite a while now, but it's one person who likes to talk about samadhi meditation and believes that he's reached a fairly high level of samadhi. I'm personally fairly doubtful about the extent of his actual samadhi attainments, to be honest, but that's another point, side point. But I also happen to know that this person listens to heavy metal and electronic dance music and rock and roll and all this very agitating, energizing, stimulating kind of music every day. And it's simply not possible to get deep samadhi if one is constantly stirring and agitating the mind in that way. So meditation practice is not like a little extra dash of flavor that we splash into our spicy life. Rather, when we sincerely commit to Buddhist meditation, then that means changing our entire life. Changing our entire life in order to support the development of a higher mind. So a retreat is a microcosm where we intentionally create that kind of situation. We intentionally create the optimal external conditions for samadhi practice. But you can also live your daily life in something very close to those conditions. very similar to those conditions. Of course, it's easier in a monastery. I won't deny that. But even if you're not living in a monastery, you can still get a high percentage of these external supporting conditions. Then when we come to meditation practice itself, I'll talk more about specific methods and procedures over the next couple of days. But today I'll talk a bit, again, about the supporting conditions. One thing which can be remarkably effective is watching how we move through the day. So again, I haven't even been talking about sitting meditation and walking meditation yet. I'll get to that eventually. But watching how we move through the day and trying to move through our day in as peaceful a way as possible. Peaceful and attentive. So for example, when opening and closing doors, as you approach the door, pay close attention to your body and make an effort to approach the door in a quiet and peaceful way. When you reach towards the door handle, reach towards the door handle in a quiet and peaceful way. As you turn the door handle, turn it in a quiet and peaceful way. As you open the door, quiet and peaceful way. As you walk through the door, quiet and peaceful way. As you gently close the door behind you, quiet and peaceful way. So as opposed to what we tend to do in an ordinary, spacey, distracted, agitated kind of way, on an ordinary day, we'll just rush through the door and flinging the door open and slamming it behind us and not even being aware of the noise that we're making, not even being aware of the agitation that we're engendering in the mind through such activity. Not even being aware of our lack of awareness as we rush through the doorway. So cultivating this kind of intentional awareness and walking through doorways is actually a activity that we do several times a day. Many, many times a day we go through doorways. So really making a firm resolution to watch how we go through doorways can start to introduce an element of serenity and mindfulness to throughout our day. So starting to shine light into the dark, shadowy corners of our experience. Starting to open up the blind spots that we tend to walk around with. And of course, applying the same principles to everything else that we do. So when picking something up, pick it up in a peaceful, attentive way. When putting things down, put them down in a peaceful, attentive way. So this doesn't necessarily mean absolutely dead silent, of course. But generally speaking, doing things in a quiet, gentle manner tends to also encourage a quiet and gentle mind. And paying attention to the activities that we do tends to encourage attentiveness of mind, alertness of mind. So trying to maintain that throughout everything that we do, everything that we engage in as we go throughout the day. Then when it comes time to do sitting meditation, similarly to approach it in a deliberate way. So not just going over and flopping down on your meditation cushion, but rather as you're approaching the meditation cushion, be clearly aware that you're approaching your meditation cushion. Be clearly aware that you have the intention to cultivate samadhi, that you're not here to space out or think about random things. You're here to cultivate samadhi. So in a quiet, peaceful, attentive way, walk to your meditation cushion. Presumably you have some kind of Buddha image or Buddhist altar or something within sight of where you meditate. If not, I recommend setting something up. It can be something as simple as what's behind me. So just a Buddha statue on a shelf or a picture on a wall if you don't have any Buddha statues. whatever works for you. And look at the image, bringing to mind Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. It can help to remind yourself that you're engaging in the practices that the Buddha taught in line with the Dhamma that leads to awakening, that has been practiced by the Sangha for countless millennia. So not just in the time of Shakyamuni Buddha, but in the time of every Buddha before, during, and after. So every Buddha throughout space and time, past, present, and future, they all teach the same practices, and people follow those same practices and attain the same stages of samadhi and wisdom. So looking at the Buddha image, whatever's there to remind you of Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, and recollecting what it indicates, bringing to mind your confidence in the Buddha's awakening and in the path that he taught, and in your own capacity to follow that path. And it's recommended to do 3 bows. So this is a standard practice in monasteries. When you enter the meditation hall, you go to your seat and you bow 3 times to the Buddha image. That's standard. I recommend doing the same wherever you are, whether it's in your room or in your home. When you get to your meditation cushion, do 3 bows to your Buddha image or your altar. Or if you don't have any image at all, bow anyway. Generate an image of the Buddha in your mind and bow anyway. Bow to that image in your mind. Then go ahead and, in a quiet, peaceful, attentive way, get in your meditation position. Traditionally, it's encouraged to sit in the full lotus position. So I usually sit in the full lotus position, and I have since I started meditating. It's a very supportive posture for meditation practice. It's excellent for engendering serenity and alertness. But it's also relatively challenging if you're not used to sitting in this way. So you can also sit in the half lotus or the quarter lotus or the no lotus or the kneeling position, or you can stand or you can sit in a chair. These are all acceptable ways of sitting. But whatever way you sit, sitting in an upright position with the body relaxed, so that it doesn't take effort to hold the body upright, because that would be an activity. Holding the body upright would be an activity. And in cultivating samadhi, we're letting go of activities. And once you're settled into position, whatever position that might be, make the resolution to not move at all. So allowing the body to be still. I really can't emphasize this enough. I say this all the time, and it can't be said too many times. Stillness of body produces stillness of mind. If you allow your body to be rock solid, as still as a stone, completely motionless as a statue, then your samadhi practice will develop much more swiftly than it otherwise would. So don't produce any volitional, intentional activities of body at all. So stilling the body formation completely. Stilling all bodily sankharas, all bodily activities completely. And stilling bodily activity just means not producing any body activity. And then the body becomes still on its own. Then still the mind. Don't engage in any mental activity at all. And whatever echoes or residue of past mental activity might be bouncing around in the mind, which optimally should be quite minimal if you've been doing all of the preparatory activities I've been speaking about, all of the supporting conditions for samadhi. If all those supporting conditions are well in place, then there won't be much noise echoing around in your mind. In fact, your mind might already be silent when you sit down. in which case it's just a matter of not putting any noise into that silence. But if there is noise in the mind, well, then just don't amplify the noise. Don't get involved in it. Don't participate in any mental activities. Allow the mind to settle out and be still. And an important element of this is not to be annoyed by any echoes in the mind. If the mind is noisy, then just that's how it is. So just don't make it noisier. But don't be irritated by the noisiness, because irritation is an activity. Just let the noisiness be noisiness, and the noisiness will fade away on its own as long as we don't get involved in it. And as long as we're not averse towards it either. And finally, cultivating the quality of alertness, sharpness and brightness of mind. So for samadhi to be true samadhi rather than sleep, the mind must be completely awake. And this can be challenging, because when the body and mind are still, then what do we tend to do? We tend to fall asleep. In fact, before getting into meditation practice, most people associate a still body and a still mind with sleeping. But in samadhi practice, that stillness of body and mind must be accompanied by sharp, attentive alertness. So this vigilance, this diligent watchfulness of clearly observing each moment. But that clear observation is done without moving attention through the moment, without moving attention through the contents of the moment. So we're keeping the mind alert, but without moving it towards anything that appears, and without moving it away from anything that appears, without trying to chase anything from the past, and without expecting anything from the future. So completely alert as the moments flow by, kind of like staring intently at a spot in a river. You keep watching the same spot, but actually moment by moment, it's always a different patch of water that you're observing. The water is always flowing by, but your attention remains steady, closely, attentively, alertly watching that spot in the river as the water flows by. So you're not seeing the same water moment after moment. And in fact, if you try to follow a certain patch of water, then you'll be moving your attention. You'll have lost that the place you were focusing on. You'll be following a certain body of water. So the mind will be moving. Or if you're looking to see what's coming, well, again, you're moving. So instead, you keep the gaze steady while allowing whatever's there to flow through your field of vision. So it's the same. We're keeping this alert attentiveness to the present moment and allowing the moments to flow through the mind. So these are a few opening words I'd like to say. So once again, this is the first of 3 talks on samadhi. So today is focusing on the supporting conditions prior to meditation practice. So at this time, if you have any questions or comments, please go ahead and type them in, and I'll give some answers. Michael says, I'd like to add that the Buddha has stated that stinginess with longing, etc., can prevent one from entering jhana. Yeah, that's true. So I thank you for mentioning stinginess. So longing I had already mentioned. So desire or craving for anything in particular. But it's true, the Buddha also mentioned that stinginess prevents one from entering samadhi. Which is a very interesting statement, and one which doesn't often get emphasized in Western Buddhist circles. But in traditional Asian Buddhism, this is one of the reasons why generosity is emphasized. From the moment a child is born, they're taught generosity. And this is one reason why, is because when the mind is consumed with stinginess, then it's impossible to enter concentration. Samadhi remains weak. So actively practicing generosity helps to cultivate the conditions which make samadhi possible. Then Bhavani asks, why do people fall asleep while meditating? There can be a number of different reasons. First off, sometimes it actually is because somebody is not getting enough sleep. So just to be clear on that, if you only sleep 3 hours last night, then there's a very good chance you're going to fall asleep during your meditation. But if you've been getting enough sleep and you're falling asleep during meditation, then it might be bad posture. So if you're hunching and slumping over, then that will tend to encourage sleepiness. It can also be caused by boredom. And boredom is the product of not paying attention. So when we're not paying attention to the present moment, then meditation is boring. And the only way to escape is to fall asleep right there on your cushion. So that's one reason why people sometimes fall asleep during meditation is just they're not paying enough attention to their meditation object. They're not taking an interest in their meditation practice. So they try to escape it by nodding off, going dull and drowsy. There's a number of other reasons which can cause it, but these are usually the main reasons. It's usually one of these. Then Sunita asks, how can I find the best position for me? I feel I am holding the body up and I don't know how to correct this. It's also very distracting in my meditation. Well, one thing which is really important is that your pelvis is tilted slightly forward while you're meditating. So if you're sitting on a meditation cushion, then you want to sit on the forward quarter or so of the cushion. So not sitting on the middle of the cushion. So if this was a meditation cushion, then instead of sitting here, you want to sit here. So sitting on the forward edge of the cushion, and tilt your pelvis forward about, I'm not terribly good with math and measurements. But there's, what does it feel like? 20 degrees, I guess, somewhere around there. I'm not really good at estimating these things, but you have your pelvis tilted slightly forward, and that creates a solid foundation for your spine to rest upright. And having your shoulders swept back so that your shoulder blades just kind of drip down your back. And the top of the head in line with your spine. All of this then allows your body to be positioned in a way that it will stay upright on its own, and you don't need to hold it up. And what you do with your legs doesn't matter so much. Again, the cross-legged position is best. Any cross-legged position will help to create a base of stability for the body. Again, full lotus is the most stable, but half lotus, quarter lotus, and no lotus are also acceptably stable. Gita asks, is humility one of the paramitas? Not specifically, but the Buddha speaks about humility in many places in the suttas. One of the discourses on humility is in the Majjhima Nikaya, fairly close to the beginning, the Saleka Sutta. I think it's Sutta number 8, but I'd have to look it up. The Saleka Sutta is on humility. So Kausar friend asks, my work involves a lot of mental activity, a lot of thinking and writing. Is it possible to keep this mental activity supportive towards samadhi practice? It can be. First off, make a resolve that when you're not working, that you aren't thinking about your work. So make clear boundaries about yourself. So from this time to this time, I think about my work. The rest of the time, I don't. And anytime you catch yourself thinking about it outside of your designated work time, stop. Tell yourself, not now. I'll do that later. Then during the time of mental activity, be alert, be aware of the feeling of being engaged in mental activity. Try to maintain a third-person perspective on what's happening. So often when we're thoroughly engaged in thinking, we're immersed in a first-person perspective on that mental activity. We take it very personally. We're very much involved in it. Take a third-person perspective. So just watching the thinking activity going on as though it was somebody else. This third-person perspective tends to be very peaceful and serene, and also cultivates a great deal of mindfulness and attentiveness. And of course, optimally, your work should be something which is wholesome. So if your mental activity is thinking about how to get people to buy useless crap that they don't need, well, that's unwholesome. Or if your mental activity is deceptiveness, that's going to be a problem. A friend of mine used to be in the military, and he was already a Buddhist when he joined the military, so I don't know why he joined the military. It's very difficult to be a good Buddhist while being in the military. But he joined the military, and he wound up in military intelligence, and he was assigned a job to falsify information. And this caused a tremendous crisis of conscience. And he eventually just had to tell his superiors, like, I cannot do my job. I can't do this. It's too antithetical to my religious practice. So sometimes that's what you have to do, is just say, like, this mental activity I'm engaging in is destructive of my Buddhist practice, and I need to do something else. But if you're doing something relatively wholesome, then it's not a big deal. It's not such a problem. Then Bhavani asks, if I can meditate well, will less sleep also be good enough? Yes, if your samadhi is strong, you need less sleep. So for me, this becomes very clear during retreat. So we've been on retreat for a few days now, and I'm already sleeping about 2 hours less than usual per day. So when your samadhi is good, you need a lot less sleep. Robin says, due to back pain lately, I start having spasms after sitting for about 10 to 15 minutes and start twisting or jerking in my seat. Would it be better to try to ignore it or to sit for less time at once? So I think you might need to see a physical therapist. Spasming is usually an indication that there's some kind of physical problem which needs to be addressed. So it would not be ethical for me to try to give advice of that sort remotely. So I think you should probably see a physical therapist. Yeah, if you're having spasms and uncontrollable twitching and jerking, that's not a meditation problem, that's a medical problem. Sometimes there can be some spasming or jerking in the body during meditation practice, but it just goes away as your samadhi gets stronger. But it sounds to me like that's not what's happening to you. It sounds to me like your case is a medical problem. So Michael says, with my legs crossed and relaxing my legs, but keeping my body upright, my legs shake. I've done most of my meditation while lying down, avoiding sitting meditation because of it. I find it difficult. Again, I'm not totally clear in that case what the problem is. It might be posture related. sometimes it's related to the degree of flexibility in your legs and especially in your hips. So doing yoga stretches for hips and knees, especially hips, can help quite a bit with those sorts of problems. It can also help to prop up your knees, so to tuck a pillow or a folded blanket under your knees to help elevate them a little bit. That can also help. But generally speaking, I don't recommend meditating lying down. Meditating lying down is an invitation to dullness and drowsiness, a hazy mind. It's not good for samadhi. If sitting cross-legged is too challenging, you can try sitting in a kneeling position, or sitting in a chair, or doing standing meditation. But I don't recommend lying down. And of course, do walking meditation in between periods of still meditation. And Kauser Friend says, giving up music sounds pretty difficult. But I was hindered by it in our meditation just now, having music bounce around in my head, so maybe it is for the best. It is for the best. I haven't listened to music in many, many years, so I don't get music playing in my head during meditation. It's very simple. If you stop putting music in your mind, then you stop having music in your mind. And when there's no music in the mind, it's a lot quieter in there. So yeah, it's one of those basic things which, if you're really serious about your meditation practice, then one of the first things that has to go is music. It has to go. There's no place for it. No place for it. If you want something to take its place, then listen to Buddhist chanting. Listen to recordings of Buddhist chanting. I particularly recommend listening to Chinese chanting, by the way. It's a bit more musical than most other kinds. But Buddhist chanting, it can take that, fill that void for you. Bhavani asks, how will be the mind while sleeping and meditating? It will be terrible. You can't meditate while you're sleeping, and you can't sleep while you're meditating. They're incompatible. Meditation is a state of absolute wakefulness. So it's the polar opposite of sleeping. And Robin says, this is in reference to the question about the spasms. Yeah, it's, again, it sounds to me like a medical problem. So that's the end of the questions. Thank you all for joining in. And if there's no more questions, then we can end at this time. We have a question. Cam asks, hello Cam, good to see you. Cam asks, can you explain the difference between mindfulness and concentration, please? Yeah, so mindfulness is directing your attention towards something, whereas concentration is when the mind is completely still, unified, and mindful. So mindfulness is a component of samadhi, but mindfulness by itself is not samadhi. You can be mindful while also being agitated and restless and moving around a lot, both physically and mentally. Oh, Ayasudhamma, good to see you as well. Happy to see you joining in. Anyway, that looks like the last question. So we'll end at this time with 3 sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. So please go ahead and join in again tomorrow at 8 a.m. for sutta study, and tomorrow evening at 7:30 for meditation and dhamma talk. So we'll see you next time.